Welcome into the I-80 Club National Fun League Super Bowl 59 recap edition. As always, on these Mondays, Josh Peterson and Mike Schaefer with you. If you've been hanging out with us all season long, we very much appreciate it. Schaef, we have reached the end of the road on my least favorite football season of all time. How are you today?
I would assume I'm doing a lot better than you, who on this space yesterday more or less laid out the blueprint for how the Super Bowl could just be horrible.
Yeah.
And that the Chiefs that I complained about for being boringly efficient and whatever would not be able to do that against this Eagles roster. I was genuinely shocked at how bad the Chiefs looked like they didn't practice for 2 weeks or had no idea what the Eagles were capable of doing. And it's not like the Eagles blitzed. They just played them straight up and
Correct.
dominate.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe that because, I mean, this is an Eagles team that should have lost if Xavier Legette could catch a pass to the Panthers. This is an Eagles team that lost to Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. This is an Eagles team that needed sort of massive snow and a last-second Matthew Stafford throw out of bounds to beat the Rams in the divisional round. This is an Eagles team that looked kind of meh against the Packers in the wild card round. And yet the Eagles team that showed up in the Super Bowl was basically on rookie mode while the Chiefs were playing on all Madden. Like, it was insane.
Yeah.
And all the credit in the world to the Eagles. They just kicked their ass. I mean, there's really no other way to phrase it.
Yeah, so I have two things off of that. The first was something that I had on my prep sheet for Friday's radio show, and you and I didn't talk about it yesterday. I had that stat about Hurts, never, attempting passes essentially in the second half while trailing after the Week 5 bye. And, hey, that held true again. No passes. He didn't throw a single pass in the game while trailing. But since their Week 5 bye, the Eagles going into the Super Bowl, and so we can add another win on top of this, they had gone 15-1, so they went 16-1. They were plus 27 in the turnover margin, and what were they last night? +2, or were they +1? +2, +1, somewhere in there. So add another 1 or 2 in there. And they won their games by an average of 13.8 points. What's the final score? 40-20. So that number ticks above 2 touchdowns, essentially. And so, as I was going to bed last night, trying not to think about the Super Bowl, but also thinking about this podcast with you, the first thing I thought of was they were this way like the last 3 months of the season. And I think it kind of snuck up on everyone. I know you bring up the Panthers game, but when was that? Like Thanksgiving? Like, how long ago were some of these games?
Beginning of December, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of it is okay, so they're week 16 and 17 or 17 and 18. They kicked the shit out of 2 of the worst teams in football, yours truly and the Giants.
Yeah.
Now, granted, 34 points against the Cowboys, only 7 against the Giants because they didn't play anyone in that game.
Yeah.
They
also beat the Ravens.
Eagles,
they beat the Steelers.
Yep. The Eagles-Panthers was on December 8th. The Ravens, which I do remember that game and thinking that result felt odd because it wasn't how I had those teams in my head. And instead of giving credit to the Ravens or the Eagles, it was more of I wonder if the Ravens were just off that day. But they won that game 24-19, and if I have this right, were they at home?
Kind of
the
dominated
home
that
for
game.
That one? It seemed
that game was in Baltimore.
Did the Ravens score late to make it closer?
Yes. Yeah, the Eagles kind of kicked the shit out of them in that day, yeah.
Yeah, the Ravens scored with 3 seconds left to bring it within single digits. So, yeah, I mean, it really wasn't close after the Eagles took care of the fourth quarter. They struggled with the Jaguars on, so it's just like when they played your team, the score differential was
bad,
75-13. So I guess it actually, and when they played the Giants, the score differential was 48-16. So I guess part of it is when they didn't play the NFC East, it wasn't like I was just blown away by them. They beat the shit out of the Bengals. Hooray. They barely beat the Browns. They barely beat the Eagles. They lost to the – so, I guess I thought of them more as the early season version of them and didn't make much of kicking the crap out of NFC East teams. They had a really weird year. Like I understand what the total statistics look like, but you look through this and they played one possession games against really horrible teams, dominated the Ravens, dominated the Rams November 24th. They dominated that game against the Commanders where it felt like it was even early. And then I know it was 26-18, but I thought the Eagles looked a lot better. That was, I think, a Thursday night
The
game.
Thursday night game, yes. They really ran away from him and hit in the second half of that
game, if I recall correctly. But yeah, I mean, it was, and so I guess I just never really believed that they were the version of themselves that 75-13 against the Cowboys in the season. So if Riss is listening to this, she's probably going to.
Oh, she is.
A nice that says 75-13 Eagles Cowboys 2024. Something like that.
Not
the year for both of you. You can hang it up.
All right, let's not give her any ideas, Schaef. Eye on the prize. We're talking about the Super Bowl. We're not talking about October football games. We're talking about the Super Bowl that was played last night.
Well, they played November and December. So yeah, you're right. We aren't talking about October football.
Yeah, that's true. You know, the takeaway that I have about the Chiefs in this game is like I feel weirdly vindicated for thinking that they were bad all year long and thinking like if they play a real team, they're going to get smoked. I felt that way in a lot of their games in the second half. And the Bills beat them, and I was like, here we go. This is the prince who was promised. And then they threw us all off the scent for whatever reason. We've talked plenty about the AFC Championship game. And because of their regular season record of 15-2, they had earned the good side of the bracket where they got to play Houston in the first round. They obviously got a bye, and then they got to play Houston in their first round game in the second round. And then, of course, they got the Bills. And I do feel like I don't think that you or I or anyone who viewed the Chiefs this year and was like, this is a lesser version. I don't think we were wrong, but I will say, and I think this is essentially how you led the pod, the way that the Eagles could just get pressure with four guys the entire game, that they did not have to blitz, like it shows
0% blitz. Yeah.
Yeah. A level of disrespect, rightfully so, that Vic Fangio had for that offensive line is like wild. Absolutely wild to me that is how they were able to approach it. So again, I feel vindicated, but I'm also like, man, what the hell happened last night? That was a pure dominating performance by Philadelphia.
Well, and we talk about it every time we talk about the Eagles, just a collection of college studs. And then it turns out getting those guys in the NFL draft, even if their measurables aren't exactly what you dream of, they're highly productive, really good players. And they were highly productive, really good players in the NFL too. Cooper DeJean, pick six, that basically at that point, it felt like the game was over.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was very early, and I think it was 17-0, right?
Correct.
After that and the extra point. But based on everything you were seeing from Mahomes, who never looked remotely comfortable, the very first drive where they had he scrambles and gets to throw off outside of the pressure, and it could have been picked off at that point in return for an interception.
Mm-hmm.
That throw was like one of the worst Mahomes scramble throws I think I can remember. And at that point, I was like, man, I wonder if there's like something wrong. And my buddy's like, well, there's pressure bearing down on him. And I was like, yeah, but that's kind of what he does, right? Like he escapes it, and then he throws a beautiful pass, and it hits the guy right in the chest, and it's a very Chiefs thing. And it just didn't happen. And then other weird things kept happening. And other than that interception, where Hurts got lit up because I think they missed the middle blitz or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Was that like the only negative play for the Eagles in the entire game, more or less?
Pretty much. I mean,
I know the Chiefs did some stuff and scored 22 points, and I couldn't tell you how they scored 22 points. This is really one of the my first instinct as this game was going on and going the way that it was is, hey, it's an 80s Super Bowl. And which is funny because obviously I don't remember any 80s Super Bowl, but I remember the olds, or people like John who don't think that they're old, talk about like how the Super Bowl was usually terrible, for a long stretch of time. And then you can pull it up. Like I think it's like 81-88. Or it's just really bad in there. So that was an awful, awful game. And I don't really know if I have anything to take from it, like moving forward. I don't know that I think that the Eagles are an indestructible machine that will win a Super Bowl next year because no one in the league can stop them. I don't know that there's anything that came out of this game where I'm like, well, the Chiefs have some real issues that they're going to have to figure out for next season. I think they need playmakers. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, they need a guy on offense. They needed Rashee Rice to either stay healthy and continue to be that guy, or they need someone that can open things up for them or make teams really have to worry about it. I wonder if it's the last year of Travis Kelce because he doesn't look like he has much of anything left.
He looks so slow.
But beyond that, like, I expect the Chiefs to be good next year. I expect the Chiefs to be threatening to make the Super Bowl next year. And I expect the Eagles to be good next year. I can imagine you in your NFC hut or your NFC East hut specifically. Just
I hate this hut.
You're just thinking like there's the Commanders. They're going to be conceivably better next year.
Yeah.
There's the Eagles, and they're already, as you would call them, a wagon.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Giants are at least
they're drafting Shedeur.
They have a high draft pick and potentially could do something with it. And we have Brian Schottenheimer.
Oh. Hey, at least they hired the Kansas State offensive line coach. You said that's a good hire.
He's a good line coach. He's a very good line coach.
Yeah.
I've often wondered if Nebraska had just like missed a boat on a Lincoln kid coming back to be their offensive line coach. But nonetheless, congratulations to Connor Riley. I'm 2 days behind the news on this one, but
yeah, that text made me laugh. All the reports on the various hirings that Schottenheimer has made so far are like thumbs up from the football people. So it's like awesome. But I think Schaef, the Dallas Cowboys, speaking of the 80s, are about to enter into their own 80s period where they are not doing anything to keep up with these other teams. The quarterback is well past his prime and he can't move anymore. Jalen Hurts' mobility last night for like the first real time, I would say, in the last couple of years, because he has been dealing with something with his knee. It was worse in 2023, but it popped up at times this season as well. He looked like a mobile quarterback yet again, and that at times was a huge difference. Not to mention he also has a great offensive line in front of him, unlike Patrick Mahomes last night. But one guy, when he was able to move, he was able to pick up a lot of yards. The other guy, even when Mahomes got yards, it would either come back because of a holding penalty or, he'd still get smoked. And I never felt like last night Jalen Hurts got smoked.
DeAndre Hopkins just dropping what looked like it would have been a touchdown.
Oh my gosh, Isaiah Nayor versus Iowa right there. And the game was, it was such a
it would have flipped things a little bit. Maybe a little bit of doubt creeps in. 17-0, I think, when that happened.
Okay, was that what it was? I couldn't remember if it was 17 or 24.
It could have been 24, but my brain thinks it was 17, and then the next score led to 24.
Okay, yeah, that was a nasty drop. Absolutely nasty. But in the end, I still don't think it's going to mean a whole lot, just given the pressure that they were able to get onto the Chiefs offense. There was all sorts of stats going around last night, Schaef. I had a couple of them saved. But in terms of what happened in the first half, drop back success rate, it was the worst first half that Patrick Mahomes has ever played. Yards per attempt in the first half, the worst first half of football that he has ever played. All of the numbers were passing or matching the eye test, and that is, we have never seen him play as poorly as we have. And that is, the Bucs loss a couple of years ago, and we talked about this yesterday on the preview pod. That one, I think, kind of sits in our memory, and it's like, wow, Patrick Mahomes lost in the playoffs, but it was to Tom Brady. And I thought he played well in that game. It was his receivers who kept letting him down with the drops on those wild passes. Last night, he did not play well. Last night, there was the Hopkins drop, and I think Kelce had his hands on a couple here and there, but he looked perplexed and confused. And again, the fact that they were only rushing 4 every play so that they always had 7 guys in coverage is wild.
How many sacks did they have last night?
Believe the last number I saw was 5.
Okay, because I think that's how many the Bucs had in 2021 as well.
Interesting.
I know they were able to generate a ton of pressure because
6 for 31.
They had 6 last night.
Yeah.
So that has to be the most sacks he's taken in his career. I can't imagine he's taken that many sacks at any other point because he's so good at usually getting out of it. I have to say, social media, for all of its faults in 2025, Twitter was on fire last night. There was some really good
Kendrick
jokes
stuff
in there. Oh, I mean, I I don't care about the halftime show. Chalk it up another year where I paid no attention to the halftime show. I have nothing to add on the halftime show. I don't care who the performer of the halftime show is. None of it matters to me because I tune out that entire, it's like 25 minutes now, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But no, just like you had people making Tommy Tuberville jokes. You had
I did see that.
You had all sorts of Brittany Mahomes jokes. You obviously had Taylor Swift jokes. I mean, I was enjoying myself. That was the more entertaining aspect of yesterday, was how people handled things on Twitter and who the targets were for all the various reasons that you might expect. And I was just laughing it up. I mean, you could just follow Michael Stibbs and get most of the good stuff. So.
I was going to say, everything that you just kept mentioning, I was thinking, oh, Stibbs retweeted a joke about that. Stibbs retweeted a joke
he had
like that.
one
Stibbs
that I'm not going to say.
Like that.
I'm not going to say because it's, people can find it if they want. But he had one that was so good. I sent it to 2 different text groups. And it's just like, you just loaded up on the ha-has. I think I was like a perfect 9 for 9. Of everybody in the 2 different text groups. And I was like, thank you, Stibbs. Thank you for your service. People were
thank you.
We were like, what? Mike Schaefer's really doing a great job finding the good tweets tonight.
Thank you, Stibbs, for your service.
And I just used Stibbs.
Matt writes, why didn't Kansas City go to the run in the first half? That was their downfall, in my opinion. The offensive line wasn't holding up to the pass rush. That was obviously very early on. There have been a few people who have been wondering about that in the chat this morning.
Do they run that well, though?
See,
or do they run in effect of they catch teams that are anticipating the pass and then they're able to work in a nice 8-yard Kareem Hunt run to kind of stay ahead of schedule on first down? Like Pacheco was bad since he came back from his injury. And Kareem Hunt is what he is at nearly, I think, 30 years old at this point. And he's more of a battering ram than he is a run away from people type. I don't think the run game would have mattered for them. I really don't. I think the Eagles linebackers would have taken that away. I just don't think the run game is a differential. I think it's a complementary piece to the whole offense, but I don't think it's a difference-making unit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm looking at the numbers. I didn't realize how few they ended up running it last night. Counting the Mahomes carries, he had 4 of them for 25 yards. He was the leading rusher. Kareem Hunt, 3 for 9. Samaje Perine, 1 for 8. Isaiah Pacheco, 3 for 7. They had 11 carries. Yeah. Jalen Hurts had 11 carries on his own, by the way. He had 72 yards in the lone touchdown.
Some of it's game flow. Look, you're down early. You feel like they felt like they were in a hole from the beginning of the game.
They were always backed up against the goal line. You know, they won the field position battle. What's his name? Ariza, dude. And look, they got their asses kicked, so I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be talking about punting today. But he's just kicking the ball as far as he can. He never tried to pin them in theory. There were 2 times at least where Ariza just kicked it right into the end zone. Whereas the Eagles did a great job of playing the field position game, especially early. You know, I find the beginning of these Super Bowls so fascinating because it's obvious that it's like the biggest game of almost everybody's life inside of it. And I think you can see that at times. The Eagles get into Chiefs territory. They got to the 50 or better on like their first 4 drives, but only had 7 points. I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting to see how they respond to it. But every time that Kansas City got the ball, whether it was on the interception, whether it was just on forcing a punt, whatever it was, they got stifled. And so there was never really a chance for any panic to set in for Philadelphia, even though their run game, at least with Saquon, that also never got going. You know, Saquon broke a couple late for, 10 or so yards, but he certainly never had the, 60-yard explosive run like he began the NFC Championship versus Washington with.
I have a question for you because this was hotly debated as it happened early in the game, and then everybody went to their kind of corners on it.
Nice.
How did you feel about the call on A.J. Brown on the first drive for the Eagles? Divorce yourself from the fact that you hate everything about Philadelphia.
Nice. Bad call. I thought that was a bad call, and then I thought that the official made a bad call on the
Goddard one?
Yeah.
Where he got hit by McDuffie? Yeah.
I thought both of those calls were bad. So I thought, in a way, it was like a makeup call. I thought A.J. Brown, it had the appearance of an offensive pass interference because his arm was extended, but I didn't think that it caused enough of movement to actually get called there.
If they call it illegal hands to the face, which it clearly was, would you have been okay with the call?
I mean,
His hand is all over the guy's face mask. I mean, it's
that's
you
true.
call that for offensive linemen, you call that on defensive backs. I don't know why you wouldn't call that on wide receivers.
Yeah,
I thought the immediate the officials are with the Chiefs reaction to it was so dumb.
Yeah.
And this is from someone who feels like the Chiefs have gotten the benefit of the doubt 8 out of 10 times for the last multiple seasons. But that was one of those. And then I didn't hear it because the volume at the party I was at was just kind of lower. And I was not locked in on the Super Bowl and had no reason to be locked in on the Super Bowl by halftime. Apparently, even the rules analyst was like, yeah, I don't know about, and it's like, they keep showing it in high def, and I was at someone else's house, so I wasn't dealing with my own crappy version of Fox. But you can just see A.J. Brown shoving the helmet back. Like, he's clearly making all kinds of contact with the helmet and the face mask. Like, I don't understand why that wasn't an obvious call for everyone.
Well, yeah, see, but they were only talking about it as a PI. They were not talking about it as an illegal hands to the face.
But
so
wouldn't that also constitute PI? Like, you can't grab a guy's helmet and
I think that's true. Yeah.
I don't know. That's the one meaningless thing I want to get sorted from this game. Is I was so shocked by like so many and the party I was at, which was very anti-Chiefs, which was hilarious. Because Shelby is a Chiefs fan. She doesn't really care that much anymore, and she did not care. It was like one of those like, they had a bad game. I guess they'll settle for their 3 Super Bowl wins out of 5. And I was like, I hate you. I hate you so much. I would be in a hole right now. Like, I would be so catatonic and distraught and unable to even form sentences today.
Yeah.
And she's just like, 3 out of 5 is pretty good, right? It's like,
yeah, that is pretty good.
What is this? Just nobody wants that. And that's been the reaction I've seen from a lot of Kansas City people, which is fair. And at the same time, it's like, damn it, I want you to feel the feels that you used to have before you got to win 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, the game unfolded in a way where all you can do, and obviously you have had Vikings games like this. I've had Cowboys games like this, where
the last 2 games of the 14-win season were this.
Yeah, it goes sideways so fast that there is no real time to like get invested in the traditional way. Like the Packers lost in the postseason last year. It was over so quickly that it was just like this stunned daze of like, oh my gosh, this is over. And like, I'm obviously very, very angry. But I'm not like as, I don't know, mentally bothered by it like I was the losses to the 49ers in the previous 2 playoffs that go down to the wire. And so it's funny that the Chiefs have now gotten to the Super Bowl all these times, and the 2 losses are like horrible football games. The Bucs absolutely kicked the shit out of them. And dare I say, the Eagles dominated even more last night than the Bucs did 4 years ago now.
I'd have to go back and watch, but it certainly felt startling in the way that they just took that game over.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. Wow, what a season, Schaef. Do we have any final thoughts? You said before we started, you're like, I don't think we're gonna have to go as long on this one as we do on the other ones. Is there anything that we're missing?
I mean, I'm always willing to talk about football if you want to talk through all of Brian Schottenheimer's hires and what you're excited about. But
we don't have to do that.
I don't know that there's a lot to get into. Is there anyone retiring that we won't get to see again
from this game?
Anything like that? No, not necessarily from this game, but the season as a whole. Like, I wonder about Travis Kelce.
Definitely.
I wonder if he's done.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's a whole lot left for him to do or prove or even be able to prove.
Yeah. Unless he wants to come back and go out as a winner and try for that. Like, what else can the guy do? You know, he's set a lot of records. He's done all the things, but he is most certainly a diminished version of himself. And that's why we didn't really talk props yesterday, but his number at 59.5 was like wildly high, and it was completely built off of reputation. And so that was one when we did it on Sportsman Conduct on Friday. It was such an easy under for me, and that point cashed very, very easily. But that he was not the version that we have seen over the last few years, and certainly the playoff version of Travis Kelce didn't show up either. He had a nice first game against the Texans. Otherwise, he stunk, absolutely stunk.
So, he had that flop though. That's what he's going to be known for is the flop against the Bills. Other than that, I'm curious if Levante David, if we've seen the last of Levante David. I think Harrison Smith is returning. I'm talking about guys that are borderline or Hall of Famers. I think both David and Smith are.
Let me give you another one then, because I formation wonders, is Aaron Rodgers retiring? There was the report that came out yesterday that the
Jets will,
that they will not be bringing him back, which I think is the least surprising news that we have seen. He does not seem like an Aaron Glenn guy. Will anyone take a flyer on Aaron Rodgers / would anyone want him as a backup, and would Aaron Rodgers be okay with being a backup? Like, he doesn't seem like the locker room veteran presence leader type. So would anyone even want him for that? And if the answer is no, would anyone even want him as a starter? And like, what kind of franchise would that be?
The Raiders.
That's what Riz just said. The fucking Raiders. Wow, the Raiders.
But the thing is, I could see Pete Carroll talking himself into it for the first year or whatever.
They could both talk about 9/11 with each other, Schaef.
I could see Aaron Rodgers talking himself into like, hey, I still want to do this. I can play for Pete Carroll. I can go back to the West Coast. I think he'd always kind of had a weird fascination with, probably more so when they were in the Bay Area than when it was Las Vegas. But their name
grew up
came
a 49ers fan.
A couple different times. Yeah, I don't see him working in the Kyle Shanahan rehabilitation school. I know all of the jokes that I get from people about him coming to Minnesota. I'm not worried about that because I don't think Kevin O'Connell would let him through the off-season performance center that they have up there in suburban Minneapolis. So the Raiders make sense to me on that level. I don't see the Titans being so desperate that they would do that. I just don't know that there's really a whole lot of teams that are like, yeah, we've got it. Because he'd have to be a starter, or he'd have to start the year.
He's not going to be a backup anywhere.
I don't know. You had the
stinkiest,
desperate team in the Jets who ran it back, did it twice, didn't learn from the Brett Favre thing. The Raiders are the only team that makes any 2% sense. And even then, if I was a Raiders fan, I wouldn't want it. I would much rather wallow through Aiden O'Connell or whatever, Sam signed Sam Darnold. Wow. I almost said Sam signed Darnold.
I was like, is that his nickname?
It's
Sign Darnold. Of course, his nickname, Sam Sign Darnold.
He's so mixed up, you call him Sam Sign Darnold. No. I would rather, I hope Minnesota keeps him, but I would rather do that if I was a Raiders fan. I just would not want to touch the Aaron Rodgers experience.
What about the Saints?
Why do we think that Aaron Rodgers right now is that much different than Derek Carr?
I don't, but I'm just trying to find teams that would do something stupid.
And then, what does that do for you cap? I guess the Jets have to hold the bag on the cap no matter what. I believe
so, yeah.
But then the Saints have their own massive cap hell with Carr and Taysom Hill and all their funny money. You remember a few years ago when the Saints were lauded for what they were doing with their crazy bookkeeping, and now it's finally all come home to roost, and they have a horrible roster. Not a great situation for Super Bowl winning Kellen Moore to go to. Is that who the coach is going to be?
Sounds like it. Yep.
So, I guess you could go get Aaron Rodgers, but I think you just write it out with Derek Carr.
Yeah.
And take your lumps for a year or two and rebuild the roster.
That's what I would do, for the record. I was just trying to figure out dumb franchises that would do something stupid like that. A couple people brought up Cleveland, including Dustin, saying Cleveland loves quarterbacks with bad personal backgrounds.
I don't think Kevin Stefanski would mess around with Aaron Rodgers, but he does have Deshaun Watson, so who knows?
Yep.
Now I'm thinking about the Raiders, and it's wouldn't the obvious thing for them be Geno Smith? Pete Carroll already has that relationship. You go get a guy who immediately, your younger wide receivers, your Brock Bowers, they're the arrow up.
Yeah, they'd have a professional quarterback in the room.
I kind of like the idea of Geno Smith for the Raiders. I don't think they're going to win enough games to matter, but they would make a market jump for a roster that's always been good outside of the quarterback position. Or I think they have talent on that because they play teams tough. And then I think their quarterback usually undoes it. And then Seattle, I guess, would have an opening. And they're another team where I think Sam Darnold actually would make a fair amount of sense there, too.
They have a new OC coming up in 2025. They already got rid of Ryan Grubb.
Which, weird. I didn't think he was the problem for them last year. I felt like Seattle was a playoff team that just fell victim of having a couple bad games at the wrong time.
Couldn't agree more.
A few injuries but they were every bit as good as most teams in the NFC that actually made the playoffs. So kind of it should be a weird offseason. A little bit of quarterback movement, a draft that nobody's that excited about.
No.
A bunch of new coaches in the league, free agency where there's a lot of non-quarterbacks that are interesting pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, let's run it back. Let's have another good season in 2025. Let's do it.
Let's have a good season, not another good season. Let's have a good season in 2025.
Sorry.
Let's have a good
Forgot
season.
this one is just this is your you had this in 2017, you've had it in 2012, you had it in 2008.
Yeah.
You're used to division teams winning Super Bowls.
Yeah, I do think that it
now it's in your household though. It's 365 days a year.
Yeah. I will
the
say
little
this.
shrine to Saquon Barkley that Banks will sleep next to moving forward.
He'll have a great time. He'll have a great time. I will say this, Schaef.
Your next dog is going to be named Saquon. It's going to be Banks and Saquon.
Okay, first of all, let's settle down on the next dog talk. Let's settle down.
You don't want a second dog?
No, we do. We definitely do. But let's also settle down on naming the next dog Saquon. I will say this, Schaef. I was so happy for her last night, seeing how happy she was. It was really, really cool. While also like hating, the reason why she was so happy. But I was genuinely happy for her. And I think it probably helped that the game was so like bad that it I never even roped myself into thinking like anything otherwise was going to happen. So I was genuinely pumped for her. I think the difference about the Cowboys now versus like you just ran through all those other losses, they do feel like they are in like a much worse state. And maybe I'm just so down on things right now because the last season felt like a throwaway. They signed Dak and CD so late in the process to essentially cry poor. I think they're going to do the same thing with Micah Parsons. Obviously, the coaching search was horrible, even if the staff that he's putting together is solid. Like the quarterback is aging and old and he can't move anymore. Like I don't think that I'm getting the best of the Dallas Cowboys in my lifetime even. And it's not like they have had a ton to offer. And so I just find myself very much in a malaise of obviously I'm still going to watch football. I'll be back in September, but man, I'm not like in a healthy place with the sport right now, just given what's happened with Dallas over the last 12, 13 months.
There's just a part of me that there's enough talent on that roster. They're going to play a third place schedule. Like, is it that inconceivable that they can win 10 games next year and be a wild card team?
No, definitely not that inconceivable. But
are you sort of in this mode where you need it to be a wagon because the Eagles are a wagon?
I mean, I certainly want that. I've had
I know everybody wants that, but it's like a playoff appearance wouldn't appease you coming off of this season.
No.
Wow. Really in a bad spot.
And I would feel like of all the people to understand this, like you would maybe be the best one because you have also never seen your team in a Super Bowl. Yeah. Right. So like that, like you have 2 steps to make as a fan. Get there and win the thing. I have 3 because I've never even seen Dallas in the NFC Championship, but I've seen them in the playoffs. Like I guess I've gotten to a point now where I don't think I can even appreciate the journey because I need the destination to be what it is.
You are in a bad, cynical spot.
I know. Yeah. It's
I'm a big appreciate the journey guy. And part of it is every team that I watch, the journey is basically all I get out of it. I don't get the celebration. I don't get the confetti. I don't get the champagne, but
yeah,
I would have a tough time mentally if I went into a season where it's like, man, if they're not one of the 4 best teams in the league, what am I even doing on my Sunday afternoons? I don't know. Like
and for the record, I don't think they will be one of the 4 best teams. So I'm almost
I don't.
Like,
I think that'd be a hell of a futures bet if you went ahead and put that in that they will be one of the 4 best teams or whatever that would be. But I view it as you get more out of sports if you're enjoying the journey than if you're only worried about the celebration. And some of that, again, is the only team I've ever seen win titles is Nebraska football, and that's going back to 97 would be the most recent.
When you were 12.
Mm-hmm. So, it's a tough situation because if I feel like I went that way, like why would I ever go to a Nebraska basketball game? Yeah. Why would I invest any time in the Cleveland Guardians.
See, but like basketball, like college hoops is different. Like there are levels to it. I think it's like in soccer overseas where it's like, yeah, maybe you're not going to win the league or go to the Champions League, but maybe you win the rivalry matchup versus the team in your city, or maybe you pick up one of the random weird trophies, that you can win by doing something. I feel like college basketball has something about that to it, whereas like Nebraska, we're just wanting them to like win a tournament game, or for years Creighton fans just wanted to make the Sweet 16. And so like, yeah, the ultimate of course would be being there, lifting the trophy, cutting down the nets at the very end. But college basketball has, I think, these levels to it, and there's also a billion teams, whereas pro football is 32. I'd be honest in admitting that part of this too is I've seen them have really great regular seasons where I enjoyed the journey, and then they don't get the destination, and it absolutely saps. Like I look back at the 14 or the 16 teams as like these giant what ifs. Certainly the 2007 season going 13-3 and being the 1 seed and then losing to the Giants at home. Like I look back at all those years of like, man, I had so much fun from September to December, and then all it takes is one bad game, and it just kind of it ruins everything else. And like. No use in crying about this, but like being, and this feeling too, being a public fan of a team, especially the Cowboys, is like this whole other interesting situation, where they lose and I log on and it's like it's hell, for a little bit. So I think all of that is going.
Yeah, I'm about to do an interview where my lead-in is Paul Allen talking after the Brett Favre interception. Like that's what life is.
Yeah,
as a semi-public figure who roots for the Minnesota Vikings. Is there no part of you where it's like, okay, part of the journey is if they were to make the playoffs next year, don't go any further than just making the playoffs and building upon it? Like, is there not that aspect to it too?
Well, I mean, there certainly could be, and maybe I'm being too down on Dak, but
is it you're tired of your infrastructure of the quarterback? Is there fatigue there?
I'm tired of the infrastructure of the organization.
Yeah. I wonder if Kevin O'Connell has given me such a breath of fresh air. Yeah. And then this year with Sam Darnold just stepping in, because I mean, admittedly was a Kirk Cousins guy. I would have preferred Kirk Cousins coming back, all of these different things. But moving on from that, having a new quarterback, winning 14 games, trusting implicitly in the coach, significantly more than the GM, in the coach, maybe that's why it allows me to kind of be Teflon with it. I also think the Vikings are going to be really good next year. Like their roster is set up to be very good aside from their quarterback. Now, if they hand it over to JJ McCarthy, we'll see how I'm talking next September. But if it's Sam Darnold again, I would expect double-digit wins. I really would. And so we're probably just different places mentally. But if you're just poo-pooing a playoff appearance, I don't know what I can do there to help you.
Well, I think part of it, going back to the infrastructure question, is I just watched a team win the Super Bowl, first of all, in the division, a rival that I hate, and I see how they build and how they are always trying to get better and how they are, in a way like the Saints, of like, we'll worry about the cap stuff in 2030. Who cares about it right now? Let's go all in. And like, look, you're not always rewarded for that. The Rams traded away draft pick for years, and it was like, wow, they're going to blow this. They're not going to get the return on the investment that they hoped. And then they have a run in 2021. They get to play the Bengals of all teams, and they win the Super Bowl. And so, like, you get the all-in and championship. The Eagles have done a masterful job of building the roster over the last handful of years. The Cowboys do not.
Well, yet they only have one title to show for their masterful job.
But it's all worth it. It's all worth it, though.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, they did everything right, conceivably, and still, there's a way that this plays out where that doesn't happen. So it's
but at least they
like
try. At least they do it, though. Like, and you as a Guardians fan, you know how frustrating that is.
I do. I think in a weird way, the closest similarity to me is not the Vikings Cowboys.
It's the Guardians.
It would be the Guardians Cowboys, which is unbelievably damning for Jerry Jones.
It's wild. They're the richest franchise in the league. They're the most valuable franchise in the league, and yet they don't spend money like it. They spend money like they're the Guardians.
It's hard for me to understand because the Vikings pour money into everything they try. Like, they try to win at a really high level. And I genuinely appreciate that. The Guardians canceled their Fan Fest because they didn't want to pay for a hotel because they couldn't use their own stadium this year. They want to pay for a convention center for a one-day to celebrate the fans. So they just canceled it.
Yep.
That's what that is.
Handshake meme. Guardians Cowboys handshake meme.
But even then, I'm jacked in baseball. Making the playoffs is different than football, but still, like I don't know. We'll get you back in. I'll build you back up over the offseason.
I'm sure I'll be there. We'll see.
No,
it was
maybe they draft Genty and you get all in on running backs.
Look, I will be excited for Genty if they end up drafting him. They're still going to need another wide receiver, and then we'll see what happens there. Dak needs to stay healthy at the very least. I mean, he's not the best quarterback in the league, but certainly having a healthy Dak Prescott is going to raise the floor of the franchise. Versus
you got CeeDee Lamb, so that helps.
Got CeeDee Lamb, and
I think their offensive line is bad, right? Like that's part
stinks.
of the issue.
Yeah, they had 2 rookies starting this year, but people again are excited for the Lincoln guy as the offensive line coach. So maybe I'll talk myself into his unit.
Connor Riley, not Lincoln Riley.
Not Lincoln Riley and not Connor Happer. It's Connor Riley.
Wow.
That is the new line coach for.
You could do a Venn diagram with Lincoln Riley, Connor Happer, and then in the middle is Connor Riley. Wow.
Mm-hmm. So we will. You mentioned it. The offseason is here. We will come together this offseason, unlike previous off seasons. I
have some ideas. Do you want my ideas out loud on the podcast right now?
Feel free. We got a couple minutes left. What are the ideas?
I think we need to have a podcast where we bring in Michael Severe to join us to talk about the draft. Or just let him dork out on the draft, and your eyes will roll over in the back of your head.
Okay.
And I'll just be excited to let Severe just get fired up about arm length and hand size. Like we could do it before the combine, after the combine, before the draft. Somewhere in that long stretch of time, we could do a free agency recap show at some point in time.
Okay.
We can do, like I said, the draft. We could do an episode after the schedule is announced and go through our
certainly.
There's a lot of content that we can do for National Fun League. We don't have to go away forever. We can come back at some point in this offseason and discuss some stuff.
And 2 other things, Schaef. We could compare quarterbacks to characters on a TV show. We famously did Succession a couple years ago ahead of the final season.
We got to have the right show, though.
Yes, we definitely do. Alex says also get severe Severance takes. Yeah, you're not a Severance guy, are you, Schaef? So we can't talk about
Severance. I'm not. I intend to watch it at some point, but it might be a while before we get there.
So we got that. Also, if you would like to sponsor the podcast so we could do more of these in the 2025 football season and get more sad Josh talking about the Cowboys, we would love to have you sponsor. We almost had a sponsor. I don't know if we ever made this totally public, Schaef. We almost had a sponsor for this podcast, and we were going to go every single week. The plan at the time was Sunday nights, but I think we've really
imagine how unbearable I would have been and how unhappy you would have been. It would have been the show.
Yes,
unbearable me, unhappy you.
You would have very much gotten your money's worth for it. So if you want to sponsor it, reach out to us. Interstate80club@gmail.com. Interstate80club@gmail.com is where you could find us, or just hit up me or Schaef on Twitter. Yeah, we got an email address. Look at us. All right. Matt says Schaef loves doing this podcast. Many are saying National Fun League.
I love talking the NFL. We could do this entire podcast and no one could listen. And it's just us on the phone or in person at a bar. I'd be as fired up about it.
Yeah, I think you called me about something recently, and then we ended up talking about the NFL for like 5 minutes on that phone call. So we pretty much do this all the time. All right, Mr. Mike Schaefer. I know I asked you this yesterday, so it's 24 hours later.
I have nothing to plug. Go to Husker247.com. There's plenty of content. The basketball team keeps winning. I did the math. They're 23-11 since Hudson was born on February 9th. That would be one of the best records in program history.
Hell yeah.
So, take that to the bank if you would. I think in conference play, they would be something like 13-9 since he's joined us here. So clearly Hudson is a difference maker for Nebraska basketball. It has nothing to do with Fred Hoiberg's coaching, Bryce Williams' ascent as a player, Juwan Gary refining his ability, Burke's ankles, nothing to do with any of that. It is a 1-year-old who has never seen them play in person, but does clap when they're on TV now. So that's
there we go. Shout out to Hudson. Shout out to Nebraska basketball. They'll have coverage over at Husker 24/7 Sports. We will also have an after Nebraska ball coming up after their home game versus Maryland on Thursday. So we got that coming this week. We have our usual I-80 Live paywalled show for subscribers only. And that'll be on Wednesday. And then, Schaef, I don't know if you know about this, but Friday night we'll do the Nebraska Ball Brunch show as usual early that morning with Jack and Caleb. But Jack and I are going to do a public Valentine's night show for any of those who are either single or they're not going out. My wife, she'll be working, and so I'll be at home alone. So Jack and I are going to get dressed up, and we're going to have the I-80 Club on Friday night, and we're going to spend an hour together because we're not doing a podcast on Saturday because he's going out of town. So, and then I think he's doing a DJ set for subscribers only inside of the I-80 Club Discord. So we got a lot of stuff coming up this week.
Wow. I just assumed he was going to turn your Friday night thing into a DJ set.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
That was my assumption there. I can see him putting on some slow ballads on Friday night, really kind of setting the mood for, just the sad songs that he used to listen to in his dorm room in Northwest Iowa.
Well, speaking of sad songs, I think it's time for me to go listen to some sad songs as we finish up the 2024 season of National Fun League. This is the season with the most episodes. We really hope that everybody who joined us, we had a few regulars who joined us every single time we did this on a Monday morning. Matt, Alex, D'Lo, we very much appreciate you and the others who stopped by throughout the season as well. For more from Schaef, obviously Husker 24/7 Sports, more from the ID Club, patreon.com/ID Club, and we would love a like and subscribe to our YouTube page. Jack and I will be back for members only on Wednesday, and then we'll have some free stuff later this week as well. For Schaef, I'm Josh. Have a great day. See you later.